Presiding Officer, let me start on a consensual note and congratulate the Labour Party for the third part of their amendment. Calls on all parties to work together to tackle inequality, support economic growth and proudly protect Scotland's public services. Now, that's pretty hard to disagree with. Essentially, of course, it just replaces the last paragraph of the government's motion with a slightly different formulation, which they've deleted. But more significantly is what the Labour Party has taken out of the government's motion, which is most of it. First, one might look at deleting reference to and criticism of the UK government's austerity agenda on the delivery of public services. Well, obviously they agree with it, they're deleting it from the government's motion. Secondly, the cuts for welfare of £15 billion, again, they're deleting that from the government's motion. Clearly, that's something that they agree with. Now, Ken McIntosh rightly made reference to government spending at UK level being the smallest proportion of national income that it's been since the 1930s. But, of course, at 5 o'clock, if he so chooses, he will vote for a Labour amendment that deletes a reference to that from the government motion. But the reality is, the biggest and most important deletion that there is from the government's motion relates to spending money on weapons of mass destruction rather than on other things. The way the motion is drawn is quite wide, covers all levels of government. And I want to just spend a bit of my time on proper defence for Scotland and their interests. And of course it touches on the wider interests of the UK. Our soldiers, and we contribute disproportionately more from Scotland than elsewhere in the UK, when they were fighting in Kosovo, peacekeeping in Kosovo, had to use their own personal mobile phones for communication because the Army's radios, the Mark IVs, were so poor that they did not work properly in the mountainous terrain of Kosovo. That's because there was not money being spent on developing communication systems that were fit for purpose. When they were in the Middle East, in Iraq, we had the sight of soldiers ordering boots by email from suppliers in the UK because the rubber soles on the boots the army had provided were melting in the desert sands. The equipment was not fit for purpose. And more fundamentally, in Afghanistan, where the UK has had so few helicopters that only 5% of soldiers have gone to points of application in helicopters, compared to 95% of US soldiers going up there. The most dangerous part of their deployment, the travel from their barracks to the point of application, as a result of which the casualty rate among UK military was 50% higher than US military, because we're not investing the right money in the equipment for our troops, and that diminishes their effectiveness and leaves Scotland and the UK vulnerable. And of course, we've actually seen in the last week further evidence of the underinvestment because money is being diverted into weapons of mass destruction that will never be used in our maritime interests, having to scrounge support from other countries when there appeared to be threats off our shores. Scotland has the longest coastline in Europe. In fact, our coastline is half of the coastline of China, one of the biggest countries in the world after Russia. And every single country around us has proper defence. The Irish have maritime surveillance aircraft. The Icelanders have maritime surveillance aircraft. The Norwegians have, the UK has none. The Irish have 8 vessels posted around their coasts, providing coastal defence. The Icelanders have vessels. There's not a single vessel based in Scotland for the purposes of coastal defence or coastal support. So we can see that we are seeing the money that's being spent on weapons of mass destruction is not only depriving our public services and our public servants from the proper funding, it is not even serving the purposes of defence in any reasonable measure that one might apply to it. Until you get the basics right, matters such as weapons of mass destruction, and I don't make a moral case against it, easy to do that as it is, I make a simple pragmatic case against the current priorities, which the Labour Party, in common with others, is deleting from the motion. So I automatically assume that Mr Finlay at 5 o'clock will be voting to spend £100 billion on new nuclear weapons, and all his Labour colleagues will be doing likewise. Now, there's only 2 of us here, Presiding Officer, who were born, I think, before the health service. I won't name the other person. And I am certainly very fortunate, and others have been fortunate when the health service was founded. And the reason I'm fortunate is my parents were able to afford the approximately £50 it cost for an operation for my mother so she could conceive me and give birth. There may be those here who regret it. But the kind of benefit I got from my family is now through the health service extended to all our population. I congratulate the Labour Party on their having done that then. Would that they now adhere once again to the principles that carried the health service into being and resiled from the cuts agenda to which they are now irrevocably wedded.